Hey everybody, this is Kyle with the Brickdose Security, and today we're continuing on the Hack the Box starting point series with the included box. Let's get going. Alright, so I got a box I've been running here. Let's go ahead and grab our IP, hop into Kali, and we're going to do a sudo nmap, put in our IP address, -sv to do the version number, -sc to do a default script search. I'm gonna let this run and I will get back to you in a second. Alright, so it looks like the only thing that we have open here is port 80, and that's just our web page. So let's hop into Firefox. Let's see what opens up when we turn on this web page. And looks like we get a rerouting from just our IP address to something that has a file that it's searching for, and it gives us a PHP home directory to bring us to this web page. Now, one thing that we need to take a look at here is when you have some kind of parameter that's set within the URL itself, the first thing that should come to your mind is we might be able to do something like local file inclusion. Now, what local file inclusion is allowing us to be able to execute some kind of file or look up some kind of directory that is already present within this web server. Since we have a parameter that is looking for something within a specific file, we might actually be able to request a different file to see if this web server will run this for us. So if we want to, I'm going to go back into the terminal here. I'm going to use the curl command, and I'm going to specify that web page that we are actually running. I'm going to press enter. So we see that nothing was actually returned, but if we were to add the -v to the beginning of this curl command, then we can start to see the page that was actually captured for us. So we can see that it tried to connect to our attack box that we are doing. It's getting a get parameter, and then it gives us a 302 page. Now, 302 does not mean we do not have a correct address. That would just be a 404, but it means it was actually redirected to a following page. And here's the location that it went to search for. And if we would like to, we can actually follow that redirection. If I go back to our flags and I do a -L, this will send a new curl command and follow that redirected page after the 302 is located. So I press enter on that, and if I scroll, you can see that we have our JSON and JavaScript and everything that could be on the web page as after when we actually get redirected. So if I curl all the way back up here, here's our original page, the 302 that was redirected. Here's the 301 saying it was moved permanently. It ignores the body of the response, and then we get our 200 page saying that we are at a final destination link of our web page. And the rest of this that we are going to have after this is going to be all the CSS and everything else that we're looking at. Now, what's interesting for us is if we scroll up, we can see the actual GET request being directed over to the home.php, saying that we were seeing within our URL, but we might actually be able to change the location of the file directed input and try to see if we can get something more on our side from an attacker standpoint. I'm gonna press up one more time, and instead of it going directly to our new web page, why don't we go ahead and copy the rest of that web page. So what it was looking for was a / file equals, and now we're going to have it try to find a specific file that we think might be available on this web server. And just for us to try something that might be interesting for us, we can do a /etc/password to see if we are able to find this on the web server. Press enter. And we can see that we are actually able to have a local file inclusion vulnerability and return to us the /etc/password directory. All right, so why don't we go ahead and try to see if we can connect via tftp to our host. I can do a sudo apt install tftp, and I'm gonna let this run. I already have it installed, and most of your Kali versions, you're going to have it pretty installed, but you may need to actually install it yourself. Now, if I type man tftp, we can see everything that tftp allows us to do. Very similar to FTP, we can specify if we need to connect to a specific connection. We can go to verbose mode. We can have kind of shorthands depending upon what is on there. We can get a file, we can put a file, and just get basic status or anything of that nature. Press Q to quit that. And the next thing that I'm going to do is type in tftp and then put in our IP address. Should have that copied. Good. And it looks like we are in right away. All right, now this is really good for us. Now that we know that we can have some kind of connection and be able to put or get a file within the TFTP service, why don't we go ahead and see if we can create some kind of shell that we can call back to and have this TFTP upload for us, and then go search for it within our local file inclusion on the web server. So what I'm going to do is hop back into Firefox here. I'm going to look up something called RevShells. And there's a website for us. And what RevShells is just a generator that allows us to go through all these different commands that it has pre-installed by just giving it a port and IP that we have direct access into. All right, so the very first thing we need to do is actually put in our IP address. So why don't we go ahead and grab that. I'm going to open up another terminal here. I'm just going to do an ifconfig, and we are going to grab our ton0, as this is what is connecting back to Hack the Box. So let's copy that over, paste that in, and we're going to designate a specific port. This can be anything that you want. For me specifically, I'm just going to do 1337. And now we're going to scroll over here on the left side and look for a PHP reverse shell, because we know that when we were looking into the original web server that it directed us to a PHP page for that initial home page. So I like to use this PHP Pentest Monkey one. It's very simple. All we have to do is give it a IP and port. Since we've already done that up here in RevShells, we are good to go, and I should just be able to press the copy to clipboard button. So let's go back into the terminal, and I'm going to actually create our file. So what I'm going to do is do a vim, and I'm going to give it a file name. Let's just call it shell.php. And we're going to paste in our PHP shell, close that, and we should be good to go. So now at this point, it should be pretty simple. We've already opened up a TFTP connection right here. We are within our home directory. If I were to ls in our home directory, I can actually do that right here. If I just type ls, we see that we have our shell.php. So if I want to, I can just go ahead and do put shell.php, and that's going to put it onto the web server. And we get no confirmation, but I can assume that we've already gotten there and we're good to go. Even though I didn't get any kind of confirmation to say that this was put on there, we can assume that it's on there because we didn't get an error necessarily. So I'm going to go ahead and exit. Oops. Sorry, I believe it's quit. There we go. All right, so it's quit in order to get out of TFTP. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is actually have local and file inclusion go and search for our web shell that we just created. So over here on this right side, I'm going to set up a netcat listener, and I'm going to do -nlvp, and the port that we assigned for our reverse shell was 1337. Press enter on that, and that's going to begin listening. And now I'm going to press up, and we are going to go try and find that file. Now the question is going to become, how do we know what web address do we go to in order to search for that file? Well, all these are going to be saved within the directory that is assigned for TFTP. We can go ahead and Google to see whatever the default directory is, but luckily for us, we can see from this colon that this is where that bootloader is currently located. So I'm going to go ahead and actually assign over to var/lib/tftp boot. And then I'm going to do one more slash, and this is going to be the file that we have assigned. So if you remember over here on the right side, we put in our shell.php. So if I do shell.php, now when this curl command executes, it's going to try and fetch this web page from our IP address. Look for the file that's in var/lib/tftp shell.php. So let me go over here. I'm going to press enter. And we can see that we have a netcat listener actually execute and get connection from Ubuntu from our connection of our attack box. This curl command is currently hanging because it is giving us access into this web server right here. Now this web server is not fully interactive for us. It's just kind of a limited shell, but we can go ahead and execute a command using Python in order to give us a fully accessible shell. To do that, we're going to do Python 3 and -c because we're going to execute this command, put in our single tick. We're going to do import pty semicolon pty dot spawn, put in a bracket, double quotes, /bin /bash, double quote, put in our parentheses and a final single tick in order to complete our command. Press enter, and this gives us a fully interactive shell as the included user within www-data. Now, if we'd like to, we can go ahead and try to find our flag. If I do ls, we can try to go into home, and now we can see we have Mike. Let me cd over into Mike, ls, and we have that user flag. Why don't we go ahead and try to cat our user.txt, and it says that we actually have a permission denied when we try to cat that as a user. We don't actually have read writes on Mike users directories, so we don't actually have access into reading that user's directory. But what we can do is go look to see if there's anything on like web configuration files that might actually help us out. Since we are within a web server, this is probably the most likely place that we'll actually find anything. To find that, we're going to do cd/var/www/html. And within that folder, we can see that we have that home PHP that we originally found on our home page. There's an index that we could look at and just a couple of other things. But the one thing that we may not actually be including is everything in this folder. So let's do an ls tag la, and this is going to include all directories that are for us, including hidden ones. If I press enter on that, we can see that we have two different files that begin with a period, which indicates that it is actually a hidden file. And this is a .hta access and a .ht password. So why don't we go ahead and cat out both of those? So cat.ht access, and then we can cat.ht password. And the HT access gave us the read write over into our index.php to give us an authorized user file, and it's going to require a valid user, which is good for us because within the HT password file we can see that we have the credentials saved for Mike with his password of Sheffield 19. So now instead of actually trying to SSH using Mike or anything, because we don't have that port open, what we're still going to try to do is get some kind of authenticated access using Mike and his password right there. So if I do a SU and then Mike, it should ask for Mike's password here. So if I give it Sheffield 19, we are now transitioned into having authoritative access using the SU command as Mike. As we can see here, we have Mike at our included box. Now, if I were to see what folders are here, we can see that we are still within the Mike folder. We are within his home directory. I can cat out the user.txt, and there is our user flag. Now that we have Mike's flag, what we need to do is try to figure out if we can escalate our privileges to see if we can read the root flag for us. So if I were to just type ID, we can see that we have Mike, he is 1000 group. And over here on the right of our groups, we have our LXD group. So if I type groups, we can see that Mike is indeed within the LXD group. Why don't we open up Firefox here and let's just Google and see what group LXD is all about. If I scroll down here, we can see the LXD getting started. That is an access control for group membership, and it allows for the LXD group to interact with the local daemon or the local host container. But up here at the top, we can see that we actually have a hack tricks for a privilege escalation with the LXD group. Why don't we go ahead and click on that and see if we might be able to actually use this exploit. Now, the very first thing I notice is it does need us to be a sudo user. So when we SU'd as Mike, we indeed became our sudo user. And so we can go ahead and try to see if we can just follow this distro right here and actually execute some kind of privilege escalation. So the very first thing it would like us to do is actually do a sudo apt update. I'm not going to do that because we don't need to update on that box. Now the very first thing on this page is it wants us to actually become a sudo user. Now, if I go back, I can already show you that if I were to try to install with Mike as a sudo user and put it in his password, it's going to say Mike is actually not a sudo user. Since this is just a box, saying this incident's reported, not going to be super critical for us. But if you're trying to stay under the radar for a device, that is probably not a good thing to see. But in this case, what we can do is actually have this uploaded onto our local box and then see if we can transfer this over using the new user of Mike. So why don't we take that same thing that we just copied. I'm going to go into this page that we had for our shell script, and I'm going to paste that in and actually install all this Golang for us. All right, everything's installed for me. Let's go back into Firefox, and the next thing that we're going to do is actually clone this repo here. So let's copy this over and let's paste that in, and we will clone that in. And the next thing it's going to have us do is actually cd into distro builder and then make it. So let's cd over into distro builder. It should be there. Cd into distro builder. Don't know why it doesn't autocomplete. And then we're going to type make. And it's going to make everything for us, which is super convenient. While that's going, let's read what the next thing is going to be. Is we need to prepare the creation of Alpine. So we're going to have to make a directory with the container image of Alpine. Let's go back into our terminal, make sure all that's done. It says everything was built successfully. That's great for us. Let's go ahead and make our Alpine image there. And it looks like we are done. Go back in. We need to cd over into our Alpine image. Paste that in. Let's go back and see what's next. Then we need to go ahead and wget this image of the Alpine YAML. So let's paste that in. And we have a successful download there. And the last thing we need to do is actually create our container in our local machine as a sudo user. So let's go ahead and do that. And everything was installed and completed for us. All right, so then the next thing it asks us to do is upload to the vulnerable server the lxd.tar.xz and the root tfs.squashfs. Well, let's make sure that we have those two files. So if I type ls, we can see that we have those two that it's looking for us next to the Alpine YAML. Now, the easiest thing that we're going to be able to do for this file transfer is actually open up a Python server and then have a wget command sent from Mike to see if we can go ahead and grab these two containers. So what we need to do is actually open up our Python server. So that's going to be python3-m and then http.server. That's going to start a server onto this local directory from our local machine on port 8000. So let's go back in and we have Mike's directory that we are looking in. We're going to do a wget http:// we're going to need to grab our IP address. So let's go ahead and make sure we grab that again. Here's our ton0 address. Let's copy that over and go back into Mike, paste that in. We need to direct what port we were on. So that's going to be port 8000. We're going to do / and then we need to include the files that we are looking to download. Go ahead and go grab those real quick. That was the lxd.tar.xz. Let's paste that in. And we got a quick file transfer of that. And I'm going to need to type all that in again. So wget http:// 10.10.14.193. We're going to do port 8000 and let's do a / and go grab our final image that we are copying over, being that root tfs. Paste that in and press go. And everything looks like it was moved over for us. If I go ahead and type ls, we should see that we have included on Mike's directory the tar and the root fs files. All right, so why don't we go back in and see what is next for us. So after we have uploaded those, we need to add the image doing the lxc image import, and we are able to do this because we are on the lxc group. Let's have Mike run this for us. And it looks like that was done. Next thing we're going to do is LXC image list. Let's copy that over, paste that in, and we should be able to see that we have created our Alpine Linux distro right there. All right, let's see what the next steps are. We're going to keep going on down from our hack tricks. So we need to create a container and add a root path. This is just going to escalate our security privileges for us. This is what's going to hopefully help us make sure that we are able to actually access root. It looks like we were having an error with the unknown flag of -- alias. Let's go back in and take a look to see what could be the issue here. I believe we don't actually need to add an alias because we are already Mike. Drop that alias for us, paste that in, and let's try that command. All right, then we were able to actually create the privilege escalation. And it wants us to do the LXC list just to confirm everything was completed correctly. And we see that we have a priv escalation as our new name within our distro, and it is a persistent distro made. The only thing that we need to do now is actually go ahead and start our service, because you can see in our current state that it is listed as stopped. Let's go back in to see if we have any more steps that we need to finish before we get that going. And it looks like we need to create a recursive path to mount a root folder using LXC. So let's copy that over. Let's paste that in, press enter on that. And we can see that we have now actually made a recursive path for our privilege esc named distro. We have created our container, we have added our root path. If you're getting any errors, we need to create a new storage pool, but we are all good there. So now we just need to execute our retainer. LXC start and give it our name of our distro. Press enter, and it should have started for us. If I do LXC list, again, we should see that it is now running in our current state. Excellent for us. And we can go ahead and try to execute /bin/sh to give us a shell onto our container. Let's hope this works. Paste that in, press enter, and it gave us a funny name, but I do see that we have our # here. I believe it just gave us some extra characters. It did for some odd reason, maybe because I tried to scroll at the same time, but it looks like that we are actually a root user. If I type ID, we can see that we have root. I don't know why we keep getting this stuff at the end of it, to be honest with you. And it does look like we became root on this attack machine. Now the root flag is located in mount/root/root/root.txt. All right, I wasn't able to find it for us. Let me go cd over into there. ls, there's our root.txt. Now let's go ahead and try to cat it out. And there's our final root flag. Now let's go back in and answer the rest of these Hack the Box questions. What service is running on the target machine over UDP? That was tftp. What class of vulnerability is the web page that is hosted on port 80 vulnerable to? That is local file inclusion. What is the default system folder that tftp uses to store files? That is /var/lib/tftp boot. Which interesting file is located in the web server folder and can be used for lateral movement? That was .ht password. What is the group that user Mike is part of and can be exploited for privilege escalation? That was LXD. When using an image to exploit a system via containers, we look for a very small distribution. Our favorite for this task is named after mountains. What is that distribution name? That was Alpine. What flag do we set to the container so that it has root privileges on the host system? That is security.privileged equals true. If the root file system is mounted at /mnt in the container, where can the root flag be found on the container after the host system is mounted? That is /mnt/root. And we need to submit our user flag and submit our root flag, and that will have completed the included box. Congratulations on completing the included box. Anytime you see that equals in the URL as a parameter for a web application vulnerability test or within your pen testing, always think that local or remote file inclusion could be a possibility. This box is an excellent example of that, of something that can actually be executed in the real world. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.